Goblin launch detected.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang.
Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's got some brand new commanders, and I've borrowed Felix's Bright Palm deck. I've got Temple Garden, Rampant Growth, Evolving Wilds, Forest, Path of Ancestry, Kessig Wolfrun, and Lizelle, Valkith's Champion. Maxim is still playing his Faldorn deck, keeping 2 Forests, Game Trail, Retreat to Kanzadu, Wild Growth, Birds of Paradise, and a Druid class. Seb is playing Sheoldred, that's right, just Sheoldred, keeping 3 Swamps, Urborg, Soul Ring, Dark Ritual, and an Ashnod's Altar. Felix has got the newly released Slimefoot and Squee, keeping Evolving Wilds, Heroic Intervention, Stitcher's Supplier, Elves of Deep Shadow, Forest, and Myconid Sportender. Seb wins the die roll and starts us off. He plays a Swamp and casts Soul Ring. Felix plays a Forest and casts Elves of Deep Shadow. I've got an Evolving Wilds, which I crack to go and find a basic and pass my turn. Maxim plays a Forest, and then pays 1 green to cast Wild Growth and enchants it onto the Forest. Seb has a Swamp for turn, and is able to tap 4 mana on turn 2 to cast No Mercy. Felix plays his own Evolving Wilds, and then takes 1 from the Elves of Deep Shadow to help cast a Stitcher's Supplier. He mills himself for 3 as it enters, and then cracks the wild to find a swamp. I just play a tap Path of Ancestry. Maxim plays a Druid class, and then drops a Game Trail, revealing a Forest from hand, and gains 1 as it enters. He then taps it for a Birds of Paradise, and passes. Seb draws for turn and plays a Swamp. He pays 5 mana for Sheoldred, who upon entering has Felix and Maxim sacrificing a creature. With Felix's Supplier dying, he mills another 3 cards, and Seb passes. Felix taps 3, losing 1 from the Elves to help cast Cultivate. He finds a Swamp to hand and a Swamp to field. He then plays the Swamp and casts a Skull Clamp before passing to me. I've got a Forest for turn, and cast in rapid succession an Arcane Signet and then a Rampant Growth to go and find a basic. Maxim plays Retreat to Kazandu before playing a Windswept Heath, gaining 3 life from the Retreat and Druid class as it enters. He then sacrifices the Heath, losing 1, but gains 3 more as he finds the land to come into play. It's a Stomping Grounds, so he loses 2 so it comes in untapped. He then taps the grounds for a red to cast Vandal Blast and blow up Seb's Soul Ring. Seb draws and is just thrilled to be paired against a graveyard deck. He plays a Swamp for turn, and then casts Dark Ritual, making 3 black mana. He's got enough to be able to transform Sheoldred into the True Scriptures, and as it flips to the first chapter, he blows up the Elves of the Deep Shadow. He then passes after that. Felix draws, and plays his commander, Slimefoot and Squee, and he makes a Saproling as it comes into play. I've got a tap Jungle Shrine, and tap enough for Lizelle before passing to Maxim. Maxim plays a Mountain for turn, gaining 3 life. He then taps 2 for a Nature's Lore, gaining another 3 life as a land he finds comes into play. He then levels up the Druid class, allowing him to play a second land for turn with a basic Forest. He gains 3 more, and passes to Seb. Seb draws and moves the True Scriptures to Chapter 2. This has each opponent milling 3 and discarding 3 cards. Seb then plays a Swamp for turn, and is able to cast an Archfiend of Depravity, passing to Felix. Felix draws, but isn't happy with it, so he skull clamps his Saproling, drawing another 2. He then casts a Necrogenesis, and goes to combat. He swings the Slimefoot and Squee at Maxim, making a Saproling token as it attacks. Max takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Felix then clamps the new token to draw 2 more. He finds a land from this, playing a Mossfire Valley, and passing. I've got Bright Palm coming in during my main phase, and I use its backup ability to give Lae'zel a +1/+1 counter, and the ability to double counters on the target until the end of turn. Lae'zel also turns that 1 counter into 2 by herself, and I then get the Scry from the Path of Ancestry. It's another land, so I bottom it. I then move to combat, swinging Lae'zel at Felix, mostly because no Mercy is stopping me from going at Seb. This adds more counters to Lae'zel, and Felix then takes the hit, and I pass. Maxim pays 5 to level up Druid class in his main phase, and this animates a forest to become a 6/6 creature. He swings it at Seb, who decides to block with the Archfiend of Depravity, and with nothing else, Maxim passes. Seb adds the final lore counter to the final chapter, and he brings back all creatures from all graveyards before transforming the True Scriptures back into Sheoldred. He's got a bunch of Enter the Battlefield triggers, and he mills himself for 3 with a Stitcher Supplier first, and then targets me with the Archon trigger. This has me sacrificing a creature, losing 3, and discarding a card, while he gains 3 and draws a card. Seb then returns to hand Sir Conrad with the Eternal Witness trigger, and makes a Saproling token from the fungus that came in. He gets another return trigger with the Timeless Witness, putting Sol Ring back to hand. He also gets to backup thanks to the Boonbringer Valkyrie, and he puts the +1/+1 counter onto the Archon. Sheoldred then comes back, and we all sacrifice a creature. Seb then plays a Swamp for turn, and taps it for a Sol Ring. He then has enough mana for Sir Conrad, passing to Felix. Felix untaps and draws. He casts a Ravenous Chupacabra, which as it enters, blows up the Archon. With it dying, Sir Conrad deals 1 to each of Seb's opponents, and Felix then passes. I draw, and tap 3 for Cami of Whispered Hopes, which would be a great enabler if I had a board. I then pass to Max. Max plays a forest and gains 3. He then passes turn. During his end step, Seb pays to activate Sir Conrad, milling the table for their top card, but hits no creatures. Seb draws and plays an Urborg. He goes to combat, swinging his biggest creatures at Felix. Felix takes the 18, and Seb gains some life from the Boonbringer. In his second main phase, he then transforms Sheoldred once again, and takes out my Cami and the Chupacabra. This deals 2 to each opponent with Sir Conrad's triggers, and Seb then plays out an Ashnod's Altar before passing for turn. Felix casts a Reclamation Sage in his main phase, blowing up the True Scriptures. He then uses Necrogenesis to exile a creature card from my graveyard and makes a 1/1 Saproling. He passes after that. I've got a Forest for turn, but it doesn't make sense to cast my Commander, or anything else for that matter, and I just pass. Maxim plays a land for turn, gaining 3, and passing. Seb also has a land for turn, and starts to count up the power on his board. He taps enough for Sheoldred and as she comes in, takes out the Reclamation Sage. This has each opponent losing 1 from Sir Conrad, and he then moves to combat. He swings his smallest creatures at Felix, and the big creatures at Maxim. This has Felix dropping to 2, and Maxim takes the big hit, dropping as well. In his second main phase, Seb then sacrifices all of Felix's creatures to the Ashnod's Altar, responding to the Sir Conrad triggers before letting them resolve, so he can get a trigger from each of them. This deals 5 to each of Seb's opponents, and he mills 3 from the supplier dying, and Felix gets taken out. He's got a bunch of colorless and some black mana left, so he activates Sir Conrad 4 times, hitting a total of 3 creatures and dealing 3 to each of his opponents. With nothing else, Seb passes. I've got a Game Troll for turn, which comes in tapped, and I pass. Maxim draws and casts Sensei's Divining Top. He activates it, looking at his top 3 cards to hopefully find a board wipe. He's quick to put them back in order of his choosing, and then activates the top, drawing a card and putting it on top. Maxim then only has to pay 1 red for a Blasphemous Act, wiping away the board. Seb's opponents then each take 8 from Sir Conrad, and Maxim passes. Seb's turn is actually quick finally for once, as he plays a Swamp and recasts Sheoldred for the 3rd time. I untap and draw. I play a Sunscorch Regent and pass. Maxim plays his Sensei's Divining Top again, and I gain 1 and add a counter to the Sunscorch. He then activates the top, and then tops the top to draw. He plays a Command Tower, gaining 3 and passing. Seb draws and goes to combat. He hits Maxim with Sheoldred for 4, and then moves to a second main phase. He activates Sheoldred, transforming her, and resolves the first chapter, taking out my Sunscorch Regent. I untap and draw. I cast a Conclave Sledge Captain, putting all 3 backup triggers on itself to make it a 7/7. I then pass after that. Maxim taps 2 for his top and to activate it in his main phase. And once he resolves that, taps the top to draw his top card and replace it with the top. He then casts a new tally, and we all exile our top cards till we hit a non-land. He hits Sheoldred the Apocalypse from Seb, and the Ozolith the Shattered Spire from me. With nothing else, he passes. Seb draws and loses 2 life from Sheoldred seeing him. His opponents then discard 3 and mill 3 as he moves to the next chapter. He then uses Doomblade on a tally to take it out, and follows up with an Innocent Blood to wipe away the remaining creatures on the board. Seb then plays a Phyrexian Reclamation, losing 2 life and paying 2 mana to bring back Sir Conrad to hand. He then recasts Sir Conrad and passes to me. I draw, play a Plains, and pass. Maxim plays a land for turn, gaining 3. He unearths Mishra's research desk, and then activates it to exile his top 2 and gets to pick one of them. He chooses the Wayward Swordtooth, which he can and does cast for turn, and then passes after that. Seb's main phase has a final chapter recurring, and we count up the creatures. We know we're pretty much dead at this point from Sir Conrad pinging us when stuff comes out of the graveyard, not to mention that Seb has a sacrifice outlet, and we scoop it up, knowing we're done for. Game review time. So that game was pretty oppressive, and I think Seb got really lucky with Felix playing a graveyard deck, as Sheoldred requires an opponent to have a certain amount of cards before she can transform. As soon as that Stitcher's Supplier resolved, I think Seb was really happy with the opening hand that he kept. Speaking of Felix, this game unfortunately didn't showcase the deck very well, but thankfully we did film some other games with Slimefoot and Squee which did a much better job. The same goes for the Bright Palm deck. I actually didn't get to do too much with this, but in some of the other games we filmed that day, things get pretty out of control. Maxim is continuing to test his Faldorn deck, and although it seems to be getting better and better, this game really didn't help convince him otherwise, since all it seemed like he was drawing was lands. There was never really a good time to cast Faldorn, because Seb kept wiping the board of all creatures.
This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.